The Atlanta class had originally been designed as destroyer leaders, but after suffering losses in surface actions in the early part of the Pacific campaign, they'd found a new lease in life as effective anti-aircraft vessels. But as with many small cruiser designs, they had very limited scope for upgrades, and the Oakland subclass had already removed the wing turrets in an attempt to regain some stability and displacement for the new radar and range-finding systems that were being developed, not to mention the proliferation of Oerlikons and Bofors. But it was felt that more could be done to make the design a more dedicated anti-aircraft vessel. But this would need a major rework to find more weight and stability. The captain of the USS Reno advocated for the removal of the torpedo launchers, the depth charges, pretty much any armour that wasn't just splinter-proofing, plus the sonar, all in favour of even more 40mm guns. It was also pointed out that twin 20mm Oerlikons were actually lighter than two singles, thanks to only needing one stand pedestal that actually wasn't that much heavier than the one used for the single mounting. And all of this was combined with a number of other measures to further reduce weight and increase survivability. All the bulkhead doors below the second deck were removed, making the bulkheads entirely solid. The superstructure was lowered as a whole and the bridge redesigned, and at first the two funnels were supposed to be trunked into one to open up more deck space, although this was abandoned partway through the redesign process as the extra trunking took up more volume and weight than it was worth. The remaining 5-inch 38 mounts after the elimination of the wing mounts were lowered except for the fore and aftmost. This brought enough weight for a full suite of radars and an armament that would now consist of a dozen 5-inch 38 guns in 6 twin mounts, 3 fore and 3 aft, now in a shallow ascending set that couldn't quite fire all dead ahead, 30 40mm Bofors in 6 quad and 4 twin mounts, and 16 20mm Oerlikons in 8 twin mounts, although an additional pair of twin 40mm mounts were thrown in at the last moment, bringing their number up to 6 twins, at least according to some sources. The only armour that was left greater than splinterproofing was a little bit of belt armour that was just under 4 inches thick, with speed being just under 33 knots thanks to 80,000 shaft horsepower driving 2 screws. Displacement came in at 6,500 tons standard. 3 ships would be built: Juneau, Spokane, and Fresno, the class lead named for one of the lost Atlantas. However, it was very quickly realised that the absolute limits of what you could do with this hull type had been reached, as the effects of the weight and stability savings had been completely countered by the increased anti-aircraft battery, and thus the ships were left in the same state of pretty much no further room for upgrades as the Atlantas and the Oaklands were in. Thus, although all 3 ships were laid down within 6 months of each other over the end of 1944 and the beginning of 1945, and all commissioned in 1946, they would have a very limited service life. Spokane and Fresno were decommissioned in less than 5 years, although they would then spend the next 15 to 20 years in the reserve fleet before finally being scrapped. But the start of the 1950s found that Juneau was still around in commission, and so she had her entire 20mm and 40mm battery removed in favour of 7 twin 3-inch 50 caliber automatic mounts, 2 placed on either side, 1 super firing over each of the main 5-inch mount arrays, and 1 more right aft on the stern. However, she would be rather quickly taken out of service afterwards in 1955, and would actually end up being the first to be scrapped in 1960, as studies on converting the class to missile ships had found that with the relatively large and heavy surface-to-air missile launchers of the 1950s, there just wasn't the space or weight to make them particularly viable missile ships. Spokane was briefly re-registered as a test ship for conformal sonar arrays, but another test vessel was found that was better, and so work was never completed on this conversion. 2 further main designs would come from this short-lived class: an attempt to further use the basic Atlanta hull with the new 5-inch 54 caliber guns. This ended up coming to nothing, as the increased weight of these mounts would mean even fewer guns and the same stability and lack of upgrade space issues, while a much larger project, CL-154, would have come in at over the old 10,000-ton treaty limit in an effort to have either 8 twin 5-inch 54 guns Atlanta style or 6 twins Juneau style with either 40mm or 3-inch 50 caliber secondary guns. This class was cancelled and then reinstated in 1945, but then cancelled again when the costs involved were projected to reach a point such that the ship would cost about as much as a number of the new destroyers then being designed, which would also use the 5-inch 54 caliber gun, and those destroyers would collectively, for a similar price, have a similar armament, but of course could be in more places at once, thus making the Juneau class the end of the small anti-aircraft cruiser design tree in the US Navy.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment on the pinned post for dry dock questions.